Welcome back. Time for the Capitol Report with Pat McGuigan of CapitolBeatOK.com. Pat, there was a national study done recently that found that Oklahoma was among the half dozen or so states that had the most dramatic political shift toward Republicans over the past 2 decades. So you've been thinking about this, you've been writing about this, about the major factors behind that shift. What are your conclusions?
Yeah, and I've had fascinating reaction from readers by putting out a Facebook post and asking for input. But the bottom line is 1962, 1994, and the year 2010. Those years. 1962 was Henry Bellman's historic campaign, the late Henry Bellman, who made it respectable to at least think about voting for a Republican in one of the most democratic states in America. That was 1962, and following him was Dewey Bartlett in 1966. So 2 elections in a row, all of a sudden, for the first time in Oklahoma history, you had back-to-back, you had the first time ever Republican governors. 1994, of course, was the year of a dramatic Republican tide that brought people like Frank Keating, Brenda Renault, and of course Mary Fallon to power. J.C. Watts moved from the Corporation Commission to a seat in Congress, and all of a sudden the Republicans were very competitive, especially on the statewide level. It took many more years, but by the mid-2000s, the Republicans were getting close to legislative control, but in 2006 the Democrats had a good year. Then 2010, the dam broke, and the Republicans came to dominance. Why? Policy, personnel, better candidates in some ways, and then major errors, such as, one I point to, was that when folks like Mike Mass were named party chairman of the Democratic Party, rather than folks like Ben Odom, longtime good Democrat, and for that matter Laura Boyd, former state representative, when those kinds of folks were edged out, and a guy like Mike Mass, who eventually was convicted of wrongdoing, became the state chairman, it just showed that the party had a certain level of dysfunction. So is it Republican brilliance? Is it issues? Is it incompetence on at least the part of some Democrats? I guess a little bit of all of the above. And then a fundamental problem is the marginalizing in Oklahoma of people like Dan Boren, very much a traditional Oklahoma Democrat, moderate conservative, but who by the end of his tenure was kind of constantly sniped at by fellow Democrats. So I think there's a lot of things that we could point to. But I'm going to turn the tables on you. What do you think is the reason that in our lifetime Republicans have gone from an afterthought to dominance in Oklahoma politics?
Well, I think that to some extent you're right. I believe that some of the dysfunction in the Democratic Party is responsible for that. And it'll be interesting to see if there's similar dysfunction in the Republican Party now that they control everything. Mm-hmm. But I don't see it as dramatic a shift. In terms of numbers, sure, it looks like it, but somebody who comes...
Democrats still have the advantage.
But as somebody who comes from the East Coast, I arrived here and seeing Democrats in Oklahoma might as well be Republicans in other parts of the country. So the philosophy, I haven't seen as much of a shift, but what I would say is another factor has been the increasing polarization of the two sides has helped to pull some of those Democrats who maybe had some issues with some of the social issues that they typically identified with as Democrats and moved them over to Republicans. Yeah. I think the increasing polarization that, frankly, the media has helped to propagate, the national media over the last 10, 15 years has helped to push some of the people who were Democrats in Oklahoma to Republicans.
I think that's a good point.
That's my thought. All right, let's get back to putting you on the spot. And the passage of Black Friday legislation reforms could be another sign of how the state has changed. Talk about that.
Yeah, just 3 or 4 sentences on this. David Holt and Tom Newell, Senator and Representative, passed legislation this year, got it through, and the governor signed it, to do away with the requirement that retailers have at least a 6% markup on their products. And in the age of big box stores, Walmart, others, as well as the internet sales, that was a law that just didn't make sense anymore, but it hung around because of our populist traditions. And I think it's a sign, much like liquor by the drink was a few years ago, that the dynamic in Oklahoma has changed in a more of a market direction. And that would be Exhibit A.
All right. Well, you can read more about these and other topics at CapitalBeatOK.com. For Pat McGuigan, I'm Alex Cameron. Have a great day.